Hi, I'm Riley, 30 years old. Last month, I got a call from my parents telling me they'd solved my sister Bella's wedding funding crisis by selling my apartment, the one I'd worked 80-hour weeks to buy, the one that was supposed to be my sanctuary when I returned from working overseas. They forged my signature, used the $300,000 to fund Bella's dream wedding, and expected me to thank them for their family sacrifice. They had no idea that their golden child's wedding planner was about to become their worst nightmare, and I was just getting started. Before I dive into this absolutely wild story of family betrayal and the most savage revenge you'll ever hear, drop a comment if you've ever been the responsible one while your sibling got everything handed to them, because this story is for everyone who's been financially abused by people who should protect them. Hit that like button if you believe in karma being served with interest, and subscribe, because this family fraud story will leave you cheering for justice. Now let me tell you how I destroyed their perfect little plan. Growing up as the older daughter in the Patterson household meant being held to impossible standards, while watching my younger sister Bella float through life on a cloud of parental indulgence. The favoritism wasn't subtle, it was a carefully orchestrated system, where I was expected to be the responsible, self-sufficient overachiever, who never needed anything, while Bella was the precious baby, who deserved unconditional support and endless second chances. From elementary school onward, the rules were different for each of us. When I brought home straight A's, it was expected and barely acknowledged. When Bella managed AB average, it was celebrated with dinner out and shopping trips. I was told to figure out my own transportation to after-school activities, while Bella had a personal chauffeur service courtesy of our mother's schedule revolving entirely around her needs. Riley's always been independent, my mother would say dismissively when relatives noticed the disparity. She doesn't need as much attention as Bella does. Bella's more sensitive and requires extra support. This sensitivity translated into years of my parents pouring money into Bella's various interests and crises, while I was expected to fund my own everything. Private dance lessons, expensive musical instruments, designer clothes, spring break trips, nothing was too costly when it came to Bella's happiness. Meanwhile, I worked part-time jobs throughout high school just to afford basic necessities that weren't considered essential enough for the family budget. College applications revealed the full extent of their prioritization. Bella applied to expensive private schools with the understanding that our parents would cover whatever financial aid didn't. I was steered toward state schools and told to be realistic about costs, because the family couldn't afford to send two children to college simultaneously. "You're so much smarter than Bella," my father explained. "You'll do well anywhere, so it makes sense to save money on your education and invest more in Bella's since she needs smaller classes and more personal attention." I ended up at a state university on partial scholarship, working 3 jobs to cover living expenses, while Bella attended a private liberal arts college that cost more per year than most people's salaries. Throughout college, I sent money home regularly to help with unexpected expenses that always seemed to coincide with Bella's various needs. After graduation, I landed a position with an international development firm that required extensive overseas work. The job was demanding. 80-hour weeks, constant travel to challenging locations, high-stress project management in countries with unstable infrastructure. But it paid exceptionally well, and I was building valuable expertise in emerging markets finance. My parents' reaction to my career success was typically underwhelming. "That's nice, dear," my mother said when I told her about my first major promotion. "Just make sure you're saving money to help Bella when she graduates. You know how hard it is for young people to get started these days." Bella had changed majors 4 times, taken 6 years to graduate with a degree in art history, and moved back home with no job prospects and significant credit card debt. Somehow, this was positioned as my responsibility to solve rather than her consequence to face. "Family takes care of family," my father reminded me when I hesitated to send money for Bella's student loan payments. "You're in a position to help, so you should. This became the family motto. Riley's success created obligations to support everyone else's failures. After 3 years of working overseas and sending home thousands of dollars monthly, I'd saved enough to buy my dream apartment. It was a beautiful 2-bedroom condo in the downtown area of our hometown, something I could use during my rare visits home, and eventually move into permanently when I finished my overseas assignments. The apartment represented everything I'd worked for: independence, security, and proof that my sacrifices had been worthwhile. I'd researched the market for months, negotiated the purchase entirely on my own, and felt enormous pride in owning something that was completely mine. When I called to tell my parents about the purchase, their response was predictably self-interested. "How wonderful, Riley," my mother said. "It'll be so convenient for family visits. And I'm sure you'll let Bella stay there sometimes when she needs space from living at home. Just make sure you don't overspend on furnishing it," my father added. "Remember, Bella's going to need help with her wedding planning soon, and weddings are expensive." Bella had recently gotten engaged to her college boyfriend Marcus, a sweet but directionless guy whose main qualification seemed to be his willingness to worship Bella despite her complete lack of life skills. The engagement had prompted months of excited planning and increasingly expensive ideas about their dream wedding. "We're thinking about having it at the Rosewood Estate," Bella gushed during one family call. "It's only $15,000 for the venue, plus catering, flowers, photography, dress, honeymoon, probably around $80,000 total." $80,000 for a wedding when Bella had no job, and Marcus worked part-time at a coffee shop while finding himself as an aspiring musician. But rather than suggesting a more realistic budget, our parents immediately began strategizing about how to fund this fantasy. "We'll figure it out," my mother assured Bella. "Your special day is worth any sacrifice." I should have seen the warning signs when they started asking detailed questions about my apartment purchase, the exact value, the mortgage terms, my insurance policies. I thought they were just showing interest in my achievement for once. "It's so smart how you structured the ownership through that company," my father said during one call. "Very sophisticated financial planning." What I'd actually done was create a simple holding company for tax purposes, with my parents listed as emergency contacts since I traveled so much. They had keys for maintenance issues and were authorized to handle minor repairs or emergencies in my absence. I thought I was being responsible by ensuring the property would be maintained while I worked overseas. I had no idea I was giving them access to steal everything I'd worked for. The overseas assignment in South Korea was supposed to last 8 months. I was managing a complex infrastructure project with a team of local contractors, working brutal hours in challenging conditions. The work was demanding but rewarding. We were building sustainable energy systems in rural communities that would improve thousands of lives. During this period, my communication with family became sporadic. The time difference made regular calls difficult, and I was often in remote locations with limited internet access. I trusted that my parents were handling any apartment maintenance issues and that everything at home was stable. Meanwhile, Bella's wedding planning had escalated into a full-scale production. Her guest list had grown from 100 to 250 people. The venue had changed from a local estate to a luxury resort. The catering had evolved from a simple reception to a multi-course dinner with premium bar service. Every conversation revealed new expenses that pushed the total cost toward 6 figures. "We just want everything to be perfect for Bella's special day," my mother explained when I expressed concern about the escalating costs during one of our brief calls. "She deserves a beautiful wedding, and we'll find a way to make it happen." What I didn't know was that their way to make it happen involved selling my apartment to fund their daughter's wedding fantasy. The first hint of trouble came when I received an email from my insurance company about a change in property ownership. I assumed it was a clerical error and made a mental note to call them when I had better phone access. The second red flag was a text from my neighbor asking if I was moving back permanently or just selling to relocate. I was confused but assumed there had been some miscommunication about my travel schedule. The third warning came from my bank, notifying me about large deposit activity in my parents' account, an account they'd added me to years earlier for family emergency purposes. By the time all these signals registered, it was too late. The devastating phone call was already coming. The video call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning Korea time, when I was exhausted after a 16-hour day coordinating with contractors and government officials. I'd been working in a remote village with spotty internet, and this was the first stable connection I'd had in 3 days. My parents' faces appeared on screen, both of them practically glowing with excitement. Behind them, I could see Bella bouncing around their living room, with what looked like wedding planning documents scattered across every surface. Riley. "Oh, honey, we have the most wonderful news," my mother exclaimed, her voice that sing-song tone she used when she'd done something she knew I wouldn't like, but expected me to be grateful for anyway. "What's going on?" I asked, though my stomach was already sinking. That expression on their faces, proud, secretive, slightly defensive, was the same one they'd worn when they'd spent my college fund on Bella's high school graduation trip to Europe. "Well, you know how Bella's been planning her wedding," my father began, wearing his jovial face that meant he was about to deliver bad news like it was a gift. The costs were getting quite high, and we were struggling to figure out how to make her dreams come true. And then we realized we had the perfect solution, my mother interrupted, clapping her hands together. "We sold your apartment." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You what?" "The downtown condo," my mother continued cheerfully, as if she'd just told me they'd won the lottery. "We got an excellent price for it, $320,000. More than enough to cover Bella's entire wedding with money left over for their honeymoon." I stared at the screen, my mind reeling. "That's my apartment. My name is on the deed." "Well, technically yes," my father said, his tone suggesting this was a minor detail. "But since you're never there and we've been maintaining it for you, it made sense to use that asset for something meaningful." Something meaningful. My home, the first property I'd ever owned, bought with money I'd earned working in dangerous conditions while sending thousands home to support their lifestyle, was just an asset, to be liquidated for Bella's party. "How exactly did you manage to sell property that's in my name?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew the answer. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. "We may have handled some of the paperwork ourselves. You know how these international transactions work, lots of documents, lots of signatures. We just facilitated the process. You forged my signature." "It wasn't a question." "That's such an ugly way to put it," my mother said, her voice taking on the wounded tone she used whenever anyone called out her behavior. "We're family. We were helping you liquidate an asset you weren't using for something that would bring joy to the whole family. By committing fraud." Bella's face suddenly appeared on screen, pushing my parents aside. She was radiant, practically vibrating with excitement. "Riley. Isn't it perfect? Now I can have the wedding of my dreams at the Grand Harbor Resort. 200 guests, live orchestra, imported flowers, designer dress, everything I've always wanted. Using money from selling my home," I said flatly. Bella waved dismissively. "You can always buy another apartment when you get back. Besides, you're never even there. At least this way, the money's going towards something special instead of just sitting empty." "My apartment isn't sitting empty. It's my home." "But you live in Korea now," Bella said with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never been denied anything in her life. "And apartments are just things. My wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event." I looked at their faces on the screen, my mother beaming with pride, my father nodding along like he'd just announced a promotion, Bella glowing with self-satisfaction. Not one of them showed even a flicker of guilt or concern for what they'd done to me. The wedding is in 6 weeks, my mother added excitedly. We've already put deposits down on everything. The venue, the caterer, the flowers, the band. It's going to be absolutely magical. How much did this magical wedding cost? I asked. Well, my father said, suddenly looking slightly uncomfortable, with all the upgrades and the larger guest list, it came to about $95,000. Nearly $100,000. For one day. Using money stolen from selling my home. And you spent the entire $320,000 from my apartment? I asked. Oh no, my mother said quickly. We only used what we needed for the wedding. The rest went into a savings account for Bella and Marcus to help them get started in life. You know how expensive it is for young couples these days. They'd stolen my home and used the proceeds to fund not just an extravagant wedding, but a dowry for their precious daughter. Money I'd earned working in dangerous conditions, saved through years of sacrifice, invested in my first property, all of it handed over to a woman who'd never worked a full-time job in her life. Riley, my mother said, her voice becoming cajoling, say something. Aren't you happy for your sister? I forced my expression into neutral territory. Years of international negotiations had taught me to hide my emotions when necessary. Congratulations, Bella. I'm sure it'll be a beautiful wedding. Bella clapped her hands together. I knew you'd understand. You're the best big sister ever. Oh, and you're invited, obviously. We kept a spot for you at the head table. How generous of them to invite me to the wedding funded by stealing my home. I have to go, I said, my finger hovering over the disconnect button. Work calls. Of course, honey, my mother said. We love you. We'll send pictures. I ended the call and sat in the silence of my temporary office in rural South Korea, staring at my reflection in the black screen. They thought they'd played me perfectly, the responsible daughter, who would swallow this betrayal with a smile and probably even send a wedding gift. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. I opened my laptop and started researching. First, I confirmed the apartment sale through public records. Sure enough, it had been sold 3 days earlier for $320,000. The deed showed forged signatures that were laughably bad imitations of my handwriting. Next, I called my attorney in the States. Jennifer answered on the second ring. Riley, what's wrong? She asked immediately. She'd been handling my legal affairs for years and knew I didn't make international calls unless something serious had happened. My parents just committed real estate fraud, I said, my voice steady as steel. They forged my signature to sell my apartment and used the money for my sister's wedding. Jesus, Riley. Are you sure? I have the public records showing the sale, and I just got off a video call where they confessed to everything. They think it's justified because we are family. Okay, Jennifer said, her voice shifting into professional mode. This is straightforward fraud. We can have the sale voided and press criminal charges. How do you want to proceed? I want to wait, I said, surprising myself with my answer. Wait? Riley, every day that passes makes it harder to recover the property. I know. But Bella's wedding is in 6 weeks, and they've already spent most of the money on deposits. I want them to get deeper before I destroy them. What are you thinking? I smiled for the first time since the call ended. I'm thinking they are about to learn that actions have consequences. And I want the consequences to be as public and humiliating as possible. Riley, I need to advise you. Jennifer, I interrupted, I need you to file all the paperwork to void the sale, but hold off on serving it until I give you the signal. I want them to think they got away with it right up until the moment their world collapses. After I hung up, I opened a new document on my laptop and started typing. If my family wanted to play games with my life, they were about to learn that I was much better at this than they realized. The wedding planner they'd hired had no idea she was about to become an unwitting accomplice in the most spectacular family revenge in modern history. The first step in my revenge plan was understanding exactly who I was dealing with. I spent the next 3 days researching every aspect of Bella's wedding arrangements, the vendors involved, and most importantly, the financial structure of their elaborate celebration. What I discovered was even more infuriating than I'd expected. The wedding planner was a woman named Victoria Sterling who ran an exclusive event planning company called Sterling Celebrations. Her website showcased elaborate society weddings with price tags that made my stolen apartment money look like pocket change. Victoria specialized in turning dreams into reality for clients who wanted luxury experiences regardless of cost. I called Victoria's office, identifying myself as Bella's sister who worked in international finance and wanted to understand the investment being made in this celebration. "Oh, Riley," Victoria gushed when she took my call. "Your parents have told me so much about you. They are so proud of how successful you are, and they mentioned you might want to contribute additional funding for some special touches." Additional funding? On top of the $95,000 they'd stolen from me. What kind of additional funding? I asked carefully. Well, Bella fell in love with some upgraded options that would put the wedding closer to $110,000. Premium bar service, upgraded floral arrangements, a second photographer for getting ready shots. Your parents mentioned that family contributions might make these dreams possible. They were already spending more than they'd told me, and they were planning to ask me to pay for the overages. The audacity was breathtaking. "Victoria, I need to ask you something confidentially," I said. "Has payment been confirmed for the current arrangements?" "Oh yes," she assured me. "Your parents provided a cashier's check for the full amount." Very organized family. I wish all my clients were so prepared. A cashier's check meant they'd already converted the stolen money from my apartment sale. There would be no reversing payments or stopping the financial bleeding once I made my move. "And what happens if there are payment issues?" I asked. Hypothetically. Victoria's voice became cautious. "Well, that would be very unusual. Most of our contracts require full payment 30 days before the event. If payments were reversed or cancelled, we'd have to cancel all services immediately and pursue legal action for damages." Perfect. I now knew exactly how to destroy their plans at maximum impact. The second phase of my research focused on the venue itself. Grand Harbor Resort was indeed a stunning location, a waterfront property that hosted some of the most exclusive events in the region. Their wedding packages started at $50,000 and went up from there depending on guest count and service levels. I called the resort and spoke with their events coordinator, again identifying myself as the bride's sister with questions about the booking. The Patterson-Williams wedding, the coordinator confirmed after looking up their reservation. "Beautiful choice for an August ceremony. Your family selected our premium package with upgraded dining service and premium bar. The deposit has been received, and final payment is due 2 weeks before the event. What's your policy if final payment doesn't arrive?" I asked. "Standard cancellation clause," she replied. "If final payment isn't received within 48 hours of the deadline, we cancel the booking and retain all deposits. The summer season is our busiest time, so we need that protection." More ammunition for my revenge plan. Not only could I avoid the payments, but the short notice would make it impossible for them to find alternative arrangements during peak wedding season. Phase 3 involved understanding my parents' current financial situation. I knew they'd been living beyond their means for years, relying on my monthly contributions to maintain their lifestyle while funding Bella's various needs. I called their bank, where I still had emergency access to their accounts from years earlier. What I discovered was alarming even by their standards. Their checking account had a balance of $3,847 after the wedding expenses. Their savings had been completely drained. They had outstanding balances on 3 credit cards, totaling over $18,000. Without my monthly contributions of $2,500, they would be unable to make their mortgage payment, car payments, or credit card minimums. They were completely financially dependent on support from the daughter they'd just robbed. But the most useful information came from an unexpected source, Marcus, Bella's fiancé. I called him directly, something I'd rarely done, but which seemed natural given the upcoming wedding. Marcus was a sweet, naive young man, who had no idea he was marrying into a family of financial predators. "Riley, it's so good to hear from you," Marcus said when I reached him. "Bella's been so excited about the wedding, though I have to admit, I'm getting a little nervous about all the expenses." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Well, your parents keep adding things to make it more special for Bella, but the costs keep growing. I offered to help pay, but they said family weddings were the parents' responsibility. Still, I feel bad that they are spending so much money on us." "How much do you think they are spending?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. Bella said around $60,000, but I saw some of the invoices when I was helping with RSVPs, and it looked like closer to $100,000. "I don't want them to go into debt for our wedding, but every time I bring up scaling back, Bella gets upset, and your parents insist they want to do this for her." Bella was lying to her own fiancé about the cost of their wedding, and my parents were enabling her deception while spending stolen money to fund it. "Marcus," I said carefully, "what would you and Bella do if the wedding had to be cancelled or significantly scaled back?" "Cancelled?" He sounded alarmed. "Is something wrong? Are your parents having financial problems?" I almost laughed. "No, nothing like that. I'm just thinking about contingency planning, what if there were venue issues or weather problems?" "Oh, well, honestly, I'd be fine with something smaller. Maybe a beach ceremony with just family and close friends." But Bella has her heart set on this big celebration. She says she's been planning her dream wedding since she was a little girl, and this is her one chance to have it exactly the way she wants. Her dream wedding, funded by stealing her sister's home. The final piece of my research involved the legal implications of what my parents had done. I spent hours on calls with Jennifer, my attorney, understanding exactly what charges they could face and what evidence would be needed to prosecute them successfully. Real estate fraud, identity theft, and potentially money laundering if they tried to hide the source of the funds, Jennifer explained. The forged signatures alone are enough for felony charges. If you want to pursue this criminally, they are looking at potential prison time. What about just recovering the money? We can void the sale immediately and sue for damages, but if they've already spent the money, recovery becomes more complicated. You'd essentially be suing them for everything they own, which might not be enough to cover your losses. This was exactly the leverage I needed. I could either pursue criminal charges that would send my parents to prison, or I could destroy their financial stability and social reputation while recovering what they'd stolen from me. Why not both? I spent that evening crafting a comprehensive plan that would accomplish several goals simultaneously: recover my stolen property, expose their fraud publicly, destroy Bella's elaborate wedding plans, and ensure they faced consequences that matched the magnitude of their betrayal. The plan required precise timing and careful coordination, but it would be worth the effort. In 6 weeks, when Bella was supposed to be walking down the aisle in her dream dress, at her dream venue surrounded by 200 guests, she would instead be learning what happens when you build your happiness on someone else's stolen foundation. My parents thought they were so clever, converting my apartment into their daughter's wedding funding. They had no idea they'd just handed me everything I needed to destroy their lives with the same casual cruelty they'd shown when stealing mine. The countdown to wedding day had begun, and I was going to make sure it was a day none of them would ever forget. 2 weeks before Bella's wedding, I put the first phase of my plan into action. It was time to let everyone know exactly what kind of family they were dealing with. I started with a simple phone call to Victoria Sterling, the wedding planner. "Victoria, this is Riley Patterson," I said, using my most professional voice. "I need to discuss some concerns about my sister's wedding financing." "Of course, Riley. What can I help you with?" "I've been reviewing the financial arrangements for Bella's wedding, and I've discovered some irregularities that I need to bring to your attention. The funding for this event came from the sale of property that was obtained through forged documents." The silence that followed was deafening. "I'm sorry, what exactly are you saying?" Victoria asked, her voice suddenly cautious. "I'm saying that my parents forged my signature to sell my apartment and used the proceeds to fund my sister's wedding. I have documentation proving that the sale was fraudulent, and I wanted to give you a heads up that the payments you received may need to be reversed." "Riley, this is very serious. Do you have legal representation?" "Yes, and we'll be filing fraud charges within the next week. I wanted to give you advance notice because I understand this puts you in a difficult position with other vendors and the venue." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "If the payments are fraudulent, I'll need to halt all wedding preparations immediately and notify the other vendors. This could result in complete cancellation of the event." "I understand, and I'm sorry you've been put in this position. My family chose to commit fraud rather than plan a wedding they could actually afford." After hanging up, I made similar calls to the venue coordinator, the caterer, the florist, and the band. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Professional notification of impending fraud charges, expression of sympathy for their situation, and clear indication that payments would likely be reversed through legal action. By the end of the day, Victoria had left 3 increasingly frantic voicemails for my parents. The second phase involved social media warfare. I created a detailed Facebook post explaining the situation to our extended family and mutual friends. I wanted to share some news about Bella's upcoming wedding. I recently discovered that my parents sold my apartment without my knowledge or consent, forging my signature on legal documents to fund what they are calling a family celebration. As someone who has sent money home monthly for years to support family needs while working overseas, I'm disappointed to learn that my property was viewed as a family asset available for liquidation. I'll be pursuing legal action to address this fraud and wanted family members to understand why I won't be attending the wedding or contributing to what appears to be a celebration funded by crime. I tagged our aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends, everyone who had been invited to the wedding and everyone who knew about my parents' pride in Bella's perfect celebration. The post exploded within hours. Comments poured in from shocked relatives. "Wait, they sold Riley's apartment without asking her. This is fraud. How could they do this to their own daughter? I can't believe they stole from Riley to pay for Bella's wedding. That's disgusting. Riley has been supporting this family for years, and this is how they repay her." My Aunt Linda, my father's sister, was particularly harsh. "I always wondered how you could afford such an expensive wedding on your income. Now I know you stole it from your daughter. Shameful." My mother's response was swift and predictably defensive. "This is a private family matter, and Riley is being dramatic. We'll work this out within the family." But the damage was spreading beyond social media. Extended family members were calling each other, sharing the post, expressing outrage at my parents' behavior. The local community, where they lived, was small and tightly connected. This kind of scandal would follow them everywhere. Phase 3 involved my parents' employer. My father worked for a local accounting firm, where trust and financial integrity were essential job requirements. I made an anonymous call to his boss, suggesting they might want to be aware that one of their employees was currently under investigation for real estate fraud and identity theft. These charges haven't been filed yet, I explained, but they will be within days. I thought the firm should be aware since this involves falsifying financial documents. The impact was immediate. My father was placed on unpaid administrative leave pending the outcome of the fraud investigation. Meanwhile, the wedding vendors were panicking. Victoria had contacted all the other service providers, warning them about the potential payment issues. The venue coordinator called my parents demanding immediate confirmation that their payments were legitimate. My mother left me a series of increasingly desperate voicemails. "Riley, honey, please call me back. There's been some confusion with the wedding vendors, and they are asking questions about payments. Can you please clear this up? Riley, Victoria is threatening to cancel everything. The venue says they might give our date to someone else. Please, we need to talk about this. Riley, your father lost his job because of these ridiculous accusations. This is destroying our family. Call me back immediately." But I wasn't done. Phase 4 involved the legal system. Jennifer filed a civil lawsuit against my parents for fraud, identity theft, and conversion of property. More importantly, she filed criminal complaints with both local police and the FBI, since the crime involved interstate commerce and wire fraud. The criminal complaints triggered automatic investigations. Police showed up at my parents' house to collect evidence, including computers, financial records, and the forged documents from the apartment sale. The local newspaper picked up the story, local couple charged with real estate fraud to fund daughter's wedding. The article included details about the forged signatures, the amount stolen, and the elaborate wedding that was now in jeopardy. It painted a picture of entitled parents who thought family loyalty meant they could commit crimes against their own daughter. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source, Marcus. Bella's fiancé called me directly, his voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "Riley, I just saw the Facebook post and the news article. Is this true? Did your parents really steal your apartment to pay for our wedding?" "Yes, Marcus. I'm sorry you're finding out this way, but they forged my signature to sell my property and used the money for the wedding expenses." "Jesus Christ. Bella told me your parents were paying for the wedding from their savings. She said they'd been planning for this for years." "Marcus, my parents don't have savings. They've been living paycheck to paycheck while I send money home monthly. The only way they could afford this wedding was by stealing from me." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I can't marry into this family," he said finally. "I can't be part of this. The whole thing is built on crime and lies. What are you going to do?" "I'm calling off the wedding. I can't stand at an altar funded by stealing from you. This is insane." The conversation I'd been waiting for came the next day. All three of them. My parents and Bella called me together, and I could hear the panic in their voices immediately. "Riley, please," my mother began, "you have to stop this. The vendors are canceling everything." Marcus broke up with Bella. "Your father lost his job. You're destroying our entire family." "I didn't destroy anything," I replied calmly. "You destroyed it when you decided to commit fraud against me." "We were trying to do something beautiful for Bella," my father said desperately. "We just wanted to give her the perfect wedding. Using money you stole from me." Bella's voice cut in, shrill and furious, "You're ruining my life. My wedding is destroyed. Marcus won't even talk to me. Everyone thinks we are criminals." "You are criminals," I said simply. "You participated in spending money that you knew came from selling my property without my permission." "I didn't know." Bella screamed. "They told me they had savings. But you knew I owned that apartment, Bella. You knew I worked overseas to buy it. Did you ever wonder why I might not have agreed to sell it to fund your wedding? I thought you'd want to help with something so important. Then you should have asked me directly instead of letting our parents forge my signature. My mother tried a different approach. Riley, honey, what do you want? What will it take to fix this? We'll pay you back, we'll make this right. With what money? Dad doesn't have a job anymore, you spent everything on a cancelled wedding, and you're facing criminal charges for fraud. Please, she whispered. You're our daughter. We love you. You loved what I could do for you, I corrected. You loved my bank account, and my willingness to send money home without question. But when you needed more than I was giving, you just decided to take it. The conversation continued for an hour, with various combinations of begging, bargaining, and blame shifting. But I had only one response. They had chosen to commit crimes against me, and now they would face the consequences. 2 days later, Bella posted a rambling social media rant about how I was a vindictive sister who destroyed her happiness out of jealousy. The post backfired spectacularly, with dozens of comments pointing out that stealing someone's home to fund a wedding was far worse than holding people accountable for theft. 1 week before the cancelled wedding date, my parents were formally arrested and charged with multiple felonies. The local news covered their perp walk, and the story was picked up by regional media as an example of family financial abuse taken to criminal extremes. But my revenge was just reaching its peak. The criminal charges against my parents triggered a cascade of consequences I hadn't even planned for. Once the story became public, other victims of their financial manipulation began coming forward. My father's accounting firm discovered that he'd been using client funds to cover personal expenses for months, including some of the money that had gone toward wedding planning. The firm filed additional criminal charges and sued him for professional malpractice. My mother's employer, a non-profit organization where she managed fundraising events, launched an internal investigation after donors began questioning whether their contributions had been properly handled. They discovered she'd been skimming money from event budgets to fund Bella's various expenses over the years. But the most satisfying development came when the IRS got involved. Jennifer, my attorney, had discovered that my parents hadn't reported the apartment sale as income on their tax returns. Selling property that doesn't belong to you and keeping the proceeds constitutes taxable income, but they'd apparently thought they could hide the transaction from federal authorities. This adds tax evasion to their list of federal crimes, Jennifer explained during one of our calls. They are looking at potential prison sentences in the range of 8 to 12 years combined. 8 to 12 years in federal prison. For people in their late 50s, that was essentially a life sentence. Meanwhile, Bella's life was imploding in spectacular fashion. The cancelled wedding had become the subject of local gossip, with everyone in their small town talking about the family that had committed fraud to fund their daughter's fantasy celebration. Marcus had not only broken up with Bella, but had started dating someone else within a month. When mutual friends asked him about it, he was brutally honest about his reasons for leaving. I couldn't marry someone whose family thought stealing was acceptable, he told People. And Bella's reaction when everything came out showed me who she really was. She was more upset about losing her dream wedding than about what her parents had done to Riley. Bella's social media presence, once filled with engagement photos and wedding planning updates, became a wasteland of deleted posts and increasingly desperate attempts to rehabilitate her image. She'd moved back in with our parents, who were now facing bankruptcy in addition to criminal charges. But I wasn't finished with them yet. The civil lawsuit was proceeding separately from the criminal charges, and I was demanding not just the recovery of my stolen money, but punitive damages for the fraud and emotional distress they'd caused. We can seize their house, their cars, their retirement accounts, everything, Jennifer explained. Since they spent your money on wedding expenses that can't be recovered, we'll take whatever assets they have to compensate you. The house where I'd grown up, where they'd made the decision to steal from me, would be sold at auction to pay restitution for their crimes. But the most poetic justice came from an unexpected source: the wedding industry itself. Victoria Sterling, the wedding planner, who'd been left scrambling when payments were reversed, had connections throughout the local event planning community. Word spread quickly about the Patterson family fraud case, and soon my parents were blacklisted by every reputable vendor in the region. "No one wants to work with clients who might pay with stolen money," Victoria explained when she called to update me on the industry response. "Your parents' reputation is completely destroyed in our community." This meant that if Bella ever did get engaged again, she'd be unable to plan any kind of elaborate celebration in the area where they lived. The wedding industry's collective memory was long and unforgiving when it came to fraud. 6 months after the initial arrests, my parents stood before a federal judge for sentencing. I flew back from Korea specifically to attend the hearing and deliver a victim impact statement. "Your Honor," I began, standing at the podium in the packed courtroom, "the defendants didn't just steal my property. They betrayed the trust of a daughter who had supported them financially for years. They committed crimes against someone who loved them unconditionally and had always been there when they needed help." I paused, looking directly at my parents at the defendant's table. My father couldn't meet my eyes. My mother was crying silently. "The impact of their actions goes beyond the financial loss," I continued. "They destroyed our family relationships, damaged their community reputation, and hurt innocent vendors who trusted them. Most importantly, they taught their younger daughter that stealing from family members is acceptable when you want something you can't afford." Bella was sitting in the gallery, glaring at me with undisguised hatred. Even now, facing the consequences of her parents' crimes, she still viewed me as the villain in this story. "I don't seek vengeance, Your Honor, but I do seek justice. These crimes were premeditated, sophisticated, and committed against a family member who had only shown them love and support. The sentence should reflect the seriousness of betraying that trust." The judge sentenced my father to 18 months in federal prison and my mother to 12 months. Both received additional probation terms and were ordered to pay full restitution, though everyone knew they'd never be able to repay what they'd stolen. After the sentencing, Bella confronted me outside the courthouse. "Are you happy now?" she screamed, causing a scene in front of the courthouse steps where reporters were still gathered. "You sent our parents to prison. You destroyed our entire family." "I didn't send them to prison, Bella," I replied calmly. "They sent themselves to prison when they decided to commit felonies against their daughter. They were trying to give me a beautiful wedding. They were stealing from me to fund a party you couldn't afford. There's a difference." Bella's face was red with rage and tears. "I'll never forgive you for this. Never." "I don't need your forgiveness," I said. "I needed your parents to face consequences for their crimes, and that's exactly what happened." As Bella stormed away, I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. Not satisfaction or vindication, but actual peace. The people who had betrayed my trust were facing appropriate consequences, and I was finally free from their financial manipulation. 2 years later, I was standing in the living room of my new apartment, a beautiful 3-bedroom condo in downtown Seoul that I'd bought with my own money, earned through my own work, without any family complications or stolen funds involved. The Korean apartment was everything my stolen home had been and more: floor-to-ceiling windows with city views, modern appliances, space for a home office where I could work on my growing consulting business. Most importantly, it was mine in every sense: legally, financially, and emotionally. My parents had served their prison sentences and were now living in a small rental apartment, both working minimum wage jobs to pay court-ordered restitution they'd never be able to fully repay. My father's accounting license had been permanently revoked, and my mother was banned from working in non-profit fundraising due to her conviction for financial crimes. They'd lost their house, their cars, their retirement savings, and most of their friends in the local community. The social consequences of their fraud had been as devastating as the legal ones. But the most significant change was in my own life and career. The international attention my case had received, the story of family financial abuse and the daughter who fought back, had opened unexpected doors. I'd been invited to speak at conferences about financial boundary setting and family manipulation. My LinkedIn profile had exploded with connection requests from people who'd experienced similar betrayals. More importantly, I'd started a consulting business helping people protect their assets from family financial abuse. The demand was staggering. Apparently, my experience wasn't as unusual as I'd thought. You'd be surprised how common this is, I told audiences during speaking engagements. Family members who view your success as their entitlement, parents who think love means access to your bank account, siblings who believe your achievements belong to the whole family. The consulting business had grown into something far beyond what I'd initially imagined. I now had a team of attorneys, financial planners, and therapists who specialized in helping people establish boundaries with financially abusive family members. We'd helped over 300 clients in our first year, adult children whose parents were stealing from them, siblings who were being financially exploited, spouses whose families treated them like ATMs. The work felt meaningful in a way my previous career never had. But the most unexpected development was my relationship with Marcus. Bella's former fiancé had reached out to me 6 months after the trial, initially just to apologize for his family's unwitting involvement in the fraud. His parents had been invited to the wedding and felt terrible about participating in what turned out to be a celebration funded by crime. "I wanted to thank you for stopping the wedding before it happened," Marcus told me during our first coffee meeting when I was back in the States. "I would have spent my whole life married to someone who thought stealing from family was acceptable." Our friendship had developed slowly, built on shared values about integrity, honesty, and personal responsibility that had been completely missing from his relationship with Bella. Marcus had used the cancelled wedding as motivation to completely reshape his life. He'd gone back to school for accounting, landed a job with a reputable firm, and was building a career based on his own efforts rather than depending on family money or connections. "Your case actually inspired me," he admitted during one of our regular video calls. "Watching you hold your family accountable made me realize I needed to take responsibility for my own life instead of drifting through it." We'd been dating long distance for 8 months now, and he was planning to move to Seoul to join my consulting firm as our head of financial planning. The relationship felt solid in a way I'd never experienced, built on mutual respect and shared values rather than family obligations or financial dependencies. My relationship with Bella remained non-existent, which was exactly how I preferred it. She'd attempted to reach out several times, usually when she needed money, or was facing some crisis that she expected family to solve. I blocked her communications and maintained complete no contact. Through mutual acquaintances, I'd heard that she was working as a server at a chain restaurant, living in a studio apartment, and struggling with the reality of supporting herself for the first time in her life. The engagement ring from Marcus had been sold to pay for basic living expenses. My parents had made a few attempts at reconciliation, sending letters from prison and later making awkward phone calls after their release. Their messages followed a predictable pattern, minimizing their crimes, claiming they'd already been punished enough, and suggesting we should move forward as a family. I never responded to any of these communications. They'd made their choice when they decided to steal from me, and I'd made mine when I decided to hold them accountable. The apartment they'd stolen and sold had been returned to my ownership through the legal process, but I'd chosen to sell it legitimately and invest the proceeds in my new life in Seoul. The property held too many painful memories to ever feel like home again. Instead, I'd used that money as seed funding for my consulting business and as a down payment on my Seoul apartment. The stolen money they'd thought they could use to buy their daughter's happiness had ultimately funded my independence from their manipulation. The most satisfying vindication came from completely unexpected sources: former family friends and extended relatives, who reached out to share their own stories of my parents' financial manipulation over the years. Your mother borrowed $5,000 from us in 2018 for emergency medical expenses, my aunt revealed during a phone call. She never paid it back, and we were too embarrassed to ask about it. Now we realize it probably went to Bella's expenses. Your father convinced us to invest in a business opportunity that turned out to be completely fake, a family friend admitted. We lost $8,000, but never reported it because we trusted him as a friend. The criminal case had apparently given other victims the courage to speak up about my parents' long history of financial manipulation and fraud. I wasn't their first victim, I was just the first one with enough resources and determination to hold them accountable. This revelation was both validating and disturbing. My parents hadn't just made one terrible decision about my apartment, they'd been running small-scale financial scams against friends and family for years. But perhaps the most meaningful outcome was the relationship I'd built with other survivors of family financial abuse through my consulting work. You showed me it was possible to fight back, one client told me. I'd been sending my parents $2,000 a month for emergencies that never seemed to end. After working with your team, I discovered they'd been using my money to fund my brother's gambling addiction. Your case gave me the courage to press charges when my sister stole my identity to open credit cards, another client shared. I always thought family loyalty meant accepting abuse, but you proved that real love includes accountability. These conversations reminded me that my painful experience had value beyond personal vindication. It was helping other people recognize and escape similar manipulation. Looking out at the Seoul skyline from my apartment window, I reflected on how completely my life had changed. 3 years ago, I'd been the dutiful daughter sending money home, while my family stole from me behind my back. Now I was an independent business owner, in a healthy relationship, and helping hundreds of people establish financial boundaries with manipulative family members. The revenge had been satisfying, but the life I'd built afterward was infinitely more rewarding. 5 years after the wedding that never happened, I received an invitation that made me laugh out loud. Bella was getting married again, this time to a man named David who worked at the same restaurant where she was still serving tables. The invitation was handwritten on simple cardstock, addressed to Riley Patterson, with no mention of our family relationship. The ceremony would be held at a local community center, with a potluck reception afterward. Guests were asked to contribute $20 toward the couple's honeymoon fund. It was exactly the kind of modest, realistic wedding Bella should have planned the first time, instead of demanding a $100,000 fantasy funded by stolen money. I didn't respond to the invitation, but I did feel a strange sense of closure. Bella had finally learned to live within her means, a lesson that had cost our family everything, but was probably necessary for her growth as a person. My consulting business had expanded internationally, with offices in Seoul, Singapore, and San Francisco. We'd helped over 2,000 people establish financial boundaries with abusive family members, recovered millions of dollars in stolen assets, and built a reputation as the leading experts in family financial fraud prevention. The work had attracted attention from major media outlets, and I'd been featured in Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, and Harvard Business Review as an expert on family financial manipulation. My book, When Family Becomes the Enemy: Protecting Yourself from Financial Abuse, had become a bestseller and was being translated into 12 languages. But the most satisfying recognition came from an unexpected source. The International Association of Financial Crimes Investigators named me their Person of the Year for my work in exposing and preventing family-based financial fraud. Riley Patterson's case opened our eyes to a type of financial crime that was happening in families across the world but was rarely reported or prosecuted, the association president said during the awards ceremony. Her courage in holding her own parents accountable has encouraged thousands of other victims to seek justice and protection. The award ceremony was attended by law enforcement officials, attorneys, and financial professionals from around the world. During my acceptance speech, I shared the podium with 3 other survivors of family financial abuse who had found the courage to fight back after hearing about my case. Financial abuse within families is particularly devastating because it combines theft with betrayal, I told the audience. Victims lose not just their money, but their trust in the people who should love and protect them most. Recovery requires both financial restitution and emotional healing. After the ceremony, I was approached by a producer from Netflix who wanted to create a documentary series about family financial crimes. Your case would be the centerpiece, she explained. It has everything: family drama, white-collar crime, justice being served, and ultimately redemption. I agreed to participate, with one condition: any proceeds from the documentary would go to a foundation I was establishing to provide legal support for victims of family financial abuse who couldn't afford attorneys. The documentary, titled Blood Money: When Family Steals, premiered 6 months later and became one of Netflix's most-watched crime documentaries. The episode about my case, the wedding fund fraud, generated millions of views and thousands of comments from viewers sharing their own stories of family financial manipulation. But the most meaningful outcome was personal rather than professional. Marcus and I had been married for 2 years now, in a simple ceremony at Seoul City Hall attended by a few close friends and colleagues. Our wedding cost exactly $347, the price of the marriage license, a nice dinner afterward, and flowers from a local market. This is what a real wedding looks like, Marcus joked as we signed the marriage documents. No stolen money, no fraud, no family drama, just 2 people who chose each other. We'd bought a house in Seoul's Gangnam district, where Marcus had established a successful financial planning practice specializing in helping expats protect their assets from family manipulation. Our combined businesses were thriving, and we'd built a life together based on mutual respect, shared values, and complete financial transparency. The house had a home office where I wrote my second book, a guest room for when Marcus's parents visited from the States, and a nursery that we were hoping to use soon. Most importantly, it was a home built on money we'd earned legitimately, purchased with our own resources, and owned free and clear of any family complications or stolen funds. My parents had both been released from prison and were living quiet lives in a different state, working low-wage jobs and presumably reflecting on the choices that had destroyed their family and community standing. I'd heard through distant relatives that my father was working as a stock clerk at a grocery store, and my mother was cleaning office buildings at night. They'd never be able to repay the restitution they owed me, but the court had garnished their wages to ensure they paid something every month for the rest of their lives. The payments were small, usually $50 to $100 monthly, but they served as a constant reminder of their crimes and their consequences. I donated these payments to my foundation rather than keeping them personally. It felt appropriate that money connected to their fraud should go toward helping other victims of family financial abuse. Bella had apparently learned some hard lessons from watching her parents go to prison and losing her first fiancé. Her second marriage was by all accounts stable and realistic, with both spouses working regular jobs and living within their modest means. Through mutual acquaintances, I'd heard that she'd apologized to several family members for her behavior during the fraud crisis, and had expressed regret about not understanding the seriousness of what our parents had done. She'd never apologized to me directly, but I didn't need or want that communication. The most unexpected vindication came when I received a letter from Victoria Sterling, the wedding planner, who had been caught in the middle of my family's fraud. Riley, she wrote, I wanted you to know that your case changed how I do business. I now require full background checks on payment sources for any wedding over $50,000, and I maintain a database of families who have been involved in payment fraud. Your courage in exposing your parents' crimes has helped protect other vendors and clients from similar situations. She'd included news clippings about 3 other cases, where her new verification procedures had uncovered fraudulent wedding funding, preventing other families from destroying themselves with stolen money schemes. The ripple effects of my decision to fight back had extended far beyond my personal situation, creating systemic changes that protected other potential victims. So here's my question for all of you who've made it through this incredible journey of betrayal, justice, and ultimate triumph. Have you ever had family members treat you like a personal bank account? Have you experienced relatives who thought your success belonged to them? How did you establish boundaries, and what did you learn about yourself in the process? Drop your stories in the comments, because I know I'm not alone in experiencing family financial manipulation. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about standing up to abuse and building something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. Share this with anyone who's struggling with financially manipulative family members, because sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is showing them it's possible to fight back and win. Thank you for listening to my story of how family fraud led to personal empowerment, professional success, and ultimately a more meaningful life than I ever could have imagined. Sometimes the people who steal from you are actually giving you the motivation to become everything they tried to prevent you from being. Remember, you don't owe anyone access to your bank account just because you share DNA. Real family protects and supports each other. They don't commit crimes against each other for party funding.